Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2018 action thriller movie based on an actual true story. It's called Entebbe, or in the American release, it was called 7 Days in Entebbe, whatever you wish to call it is perfectly alright by me. This movie runs for 1 hour and 47 minutes long. It is directed by Jose Padilla. It is produced by Tim Bevan, Liza Chastain, Eric Fellner, Ron Halpern, Kate Solomon, and Michelle Wright. The script was written by Gregory Burke. The score was done by Rodrigo Amarante, so I should say. The cinematography by Lula Carvalho, and it was edited by Daniel Rezende. And the stars of the movie are Daniel Bruhl, Rosamund Pike, Eddie Marsan, Lior Ashkenazi, Denis Menochet, Ben Schnetzer, Angel Bonnani, Nonso Anozie, and Zina Zinechenko. Entebbe, or also called 7 Days in Entebbe, tells the story of Operation Entebbe that happened back in July of 1976, in which Israel commandos attempt to save hostages on board who are under a terrorist threat on the Air Force plane going from Tel Aviv to Paris, only to end up in Entebbe, Uganda. Through the efforts of retelling this historic story is admirable at best. I'll give A for effort, but I don't know if I'm going to do the same for marking. The final product just simply doesn't come out as many had anticipated, as the watch was laboring and dull, and the thrills were almost absent, as the exciting events quickly lose their momentum, and the focus just disappears, and stuff that is not in sync of the movie takes over, making it very distracting and inconvenient. Hey, listen. When we're expecting something, we want it. I just find it inconvenient when they promise to tell us something and yet it just doesn't seem like it wants to come true. Whoa, those are some pretty loud helicopters out there. Speaking of distracting, huh? Alright, now, where were we? In the end, the rescue mission that we were expected to see the main primary emphasis on just becomes nothing more than a mere afterthought. The rescue mission totally lacks the punch it truly deserves, and then it makes us care less about the hostages being saved than we really wanted to. I mean, when this story appeared on the news back in the 70s, and if I would have been alive or at least a little much older back then, I mean, this was in 1976, around July of 76, so this is like much before I was born. But if I would have been alive back then, I probably would have took a lot of pity for those poor people who just wanted to go on the plane to whatever destination is they were going to, and to see them put in this predicament you kind of somehow have to feel a great majority, a great ounce of pity for these poor individuals. And even though 102 hostages were rescued in this mission, there were still 4 deaths. One of them was met with extreme tragic results. The film focuses on the 2 main terrorists, both of German extraction, named Bridget Coleman, played by Rosamund Pike, and Wilfred Bosi, played by Daniel Bruhl, who feel that this is not their intention to commit this heinous act, but were pressured by an elite group known as the Revolutionary Cells, which were a West German left-wing terrorist group whose intention was to spread the world of anti-imperialism. It is a bold move by director Jose Padila and screenwriter Gregory Burke to make those terrorists more humane by being kind to the hostages, making them out as catalysts in the creation of making Israel a country after World War II. So although they made Bridget and Wilfried sympathetic, the other terrorists were not given the same treatment, making them fearsome and intimidating, and even getting aggressive to someone on board who they thought was an agent. Apparently that character was killed, but did we actually ever have the time to stop to care about this poor sucker? I'm afraid not. And it's not because I don't have any remorse or sympathy in my heart. I do. But since we never get a clear picture of the motive as to why they killed this poor fool, and there was really very little to no backstory about the character who got killed. He was just an unfortunate victim at the wrong place at the wrong time. Grant you, the reason why I refer to him as a fool is because he did something completely foolish. So due to his own stupidity, he was shot dead. And I couldn't care about it. And I couldn't even care about him or couldn't care less. And it's not because I have malice in my heart, but it's because I don't know the character, I don't know his backstory, I don't know if the shooting was legit or not, or it's just some guy being stupid and he took it upon himself. I feel bad, yes. I mean, think about his friends and his family. I do take that kind of sympathy, yes. And maybe he didn't deserve to die, but inevitably, he did. And pretty much, it's not because I don't care about the guy, but it's the film itself that makes me not want to care about the person because the hostages are just an afterthought. The main emphasis is on these reluctant terrorists who are spreading fear and intimidation upon the other passengers on the plane. And we're all supposed to we're all supposed to be manipulated into thinking that these terrorists are just unfortunate victims with guns. They want us to make us feel bad for them, but in the end, they're hijacking a plane. They're terrorists. And it doesn't matter what their skin color is, or what their race, or religion, or creed, or what they believe in. In the end, they're committing a heinous act. We're not supposed to feel sorry for these guys. They want us to make us think, oh, they're pointing guns on us, and next thing you know, they're going to be singing Kumbaya in front of these passengers while they're still pointing arms at these poor people. And if you step out of line, it could cost you your life like the poor fool who got shot. Oh, but they're just a victim of circumstance. Well, fuck you. These guys are horrible, evil, despicable individuals. We're not supposed to feel sorry for them. I'm sorry, I got a little bit off hinge. But the thing is that these guys are bad people, and they make us feel like we should just sit back and take sorry and pity for these individuals. If they didn't want to do it, they didn't have to take the job. And yeah, we're supposed to feel sorry for them. Well, I'm sorry, but I can't. The other main plot was on the Israeli cabinet, as it's in a concerned situation that as they fear that many civilians are likely going to die on foreign soil for absolutely no reason other than just being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, they didn't know this was going to happen. These are all innocent victims who had become unfortunate hostages just because they were being held up by some revolutionary group who wanted something like $5 million. And so they decided to hold these poor victims at ransom and keep them in the Ugandan city of Entebbe until they could come up with the money. And so all of a sudden this hostage crisis turned into an operation rescue unit. But in the end, what we were expecting was to see these victims being rescued. We didn't get very much of that. The main emphasis was basically on the hijackers who are trying to, calm people down while still pointing guns and threatening to shoot. And then you have the Israeli cabinet trying to go through some pretty difficult situations that could either make or break these people. These people could probably all come out alive, or they could all come out dead. Well, at least the aftermath, if you ever read the news, was that yes, 106 passengers, 102 were rescued, which is still a very good number. But then I also feel bad for the 4 who met their fate. And sure, since this 1976 incident, new pieces of information were added as new perspectives were taken into account, which is very admirable because you learn something new every day and new things do come out that was never mentioned before. So I'm glad they kind of put that to that extension. The only thing we get is that the Israelis and the Palestinians are pretty much on non-talking terms. Oh, and then there's what was supposed to be the climactic rescue mission, in which the Israeli Defense Force rescues the hostages on Air France Flight 139. It was only looked at with little results, and like I mentioned before, it became nothing more than just an afterthought, with no climate, no no focus. It was basically just something that we didn't really care for because there was no care put into the rescue mission to make us feel invested into that side of the story. I mean, back in the 70s when this movie was fresh, to the two movies based on Operation Entebbe were made and definitely had much better results than this travesty of a movie. I mean, I'll tell you what the name of the titles were a little bit later on, but at least you could say that, maybe this was a little more fresh on the mind since the two movies that I will be aforementioning came out around the time of the Operation Entebbe, because it was more accurate and it was more fresh on people's minds. But here, you don't get very much of it, or very much focus on that side of the story. You mostly are just focusing on the hijackers and the Israeli cabinet unsure of where to go from here. Now, I've mentioned quite a few bad things about this movie. Well, it's actually quite worse than what I've said so far. There are a myriad of things that make Entebbe a bad movie. The acting ranged from either really good to badly miscast. It's pretty much hit or miss when it comes to the casting choices of the performers. It's not entirely by fault of the actors and actresses, but the material that was given to them. Rosamund Pike, although she physically looked the part of Bridget Coleman with the dark hair, the glasses, and a very, very convincing German accent, she was definitely the ringleader here in this hijack. And she is, of course, has that kind of level of energy from the role of Bridget Coleman. She still just seems a bit miscast in the role because of the fact that they made her off way too sympathetic when in reality, during the whole Entebbe crisis or the Air Flight 139 hijacking, the real Bridget Coleman was just as fearsome and as intimidating as the other hijackers. And though she has, and now, I'm not here to put Rosamund Pike down. She has been in many different good roles in the past and makes the most of what was given to her. It was just unfortunate that she didn't really manage to pull it off very convincingly, unfortunately. Daniel Bruhl, he was better as the other German terrorists and gave us a more reasonable approach to his character. Meanwhile, Eddie Marsan, he looks ill at ease as Israeli Defense Minister Shimon Peres. We also got Denis Menochet. He was baffling in his dull performance as plane engineer Jacques Lemoyne. I mean, you would expect him to generate a lot of fear and intimidation, but he just seems dull and stone-faced. But I think the real standout performance, and he doesn't get very much credit, and he's not exactly a well-known household Hollywood name or anything like that, but he does give probably the best performance in this movie. I'm talking about Lior Ashkenazi. Lior Ashkenazi was just near perfect as Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. I mean, he just captured the role convincing. I wish he had more screen time than the others because he just pulled it off perfectly. And then you also have Nonso and Anozie as Ugandan President Idi Amin. And he is definitely a far cry from Forrest Whitaker's portrayal of Idi Amin in The Last King of Scotland. Here in this movie, instead of playing a badass, cruel leader that Idi Amin really was, he was eventually just played too much for parody when he really shouldn't due to the subject matter of this movie. He was just played off for just mere comic relief, and I found it to be very appalling in its nature. So while the acting was very much hit and miss, the other fault of this movie is that the rescue mission was bogged down by a continual emphasis of some artsy dance sequence that gets repeated here quite often. The dancer who keeps falling. What purpose was that to just focus that all the time? A whole bunch of dancers get up, except for one who just constantly falls off her seat. What is the point? Why was that even put into the movie anyway? Was it because Padilla wanted a more artsy type movie, but we were expecting a rescue mission action thriller, which is what we came here to see in the very first place to begin with? We did not get that. Instead, we had this fucking stupid dance where a girl just keeps constantly falling off her chair with which absolutely serves absolutely no point to it whatsoever. And then in the end, the rescue mission scenes were treated so anticlimactic. The slow motion camera work and the screen time was very, very limited. I would have loved to see more development within the hostages. I wanted to see a little more backstory of them. Maybe even one or two. And we could probably have gotten a much more better understanding, a better focus, a better emphasis on this whole hostage crisis. That was sounding like something that was really, really missing in this movie. And this was because Padilla didn't want his artistic interruptions overwrought with action sequences, even though that was the point to the story. And if you think that's bad, the dialogue was as weak as the characterizations, mainly thanks to Gregory Burke's poorly thought out script, and the messages behind it were simply null and void. And if you think it sounds subtle and intelligent, when really it's actually quite fucking lame. Even the strong performances from Daniel Bruhl and Lior Ashkenazi, who was just spot on perfect in his role, even though he had limited screen time, they couldn't really save this turkey either, I'm afraid. No. I don't pull any punches. I try to stay as honest as I can. Even sometimes if the truth hurts. So in the end, this retelling of Operation Entebbe could have been potentially an interesting action thriller based on an actual event. I think it would have been better if you checked out the other two films based on the story. One of them was, of course, The Raid in Entebbe, which starred Peter Finch and Charles Bronson. And then there was Victory at Entebbe, which starred Kirk Douglas and Anthony Hopkins. Both were from the year 1976 and were much better than what we got here. It might be biased by saying that, because it was so fresh and so new, that no wonder why they would. But at least it would give us a real sense of more authenticity. And it actually had more gritty details than compared to just this watered down stuff, all because the director wanted the movie to be more artistic than realistic, which actually had much more graphic results to it. Well, it wasn't overly graphic because only 4 people got killed, but still, I would have been more invested in the rescue mission, which was not really been properly featured here. So when all said and done, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I unfortunately would have to give the 7 Days in Entebbe, or Entebbe, whatever you wish to call it, a 5 out of 10. So although I give the effort to Jose Padilla for trying to recreate this event, it was definitely a poor adaptation. And the other two from 1976 actually fared a lot better. So I don't recommend you guys to see this one, I'm afraid. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Red Rider saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.